Today on set with me is a face you're used to, but whenever we have this face on set, then you get to know we're talking about the needs. I'd like us to go straight into what we want to talk about today. You have been in the real estate sector for quite some time now. We have had the property show for the last 15 years now. And actually, mid last month, that's August, there was a lot of talk about property developers and how they're giving out, a product that is substandard, a product that is not right, a product that is hazardous. And one thing I'd like to say is that I feel the property developers are being harshly judged. Uganda, we had a gap, a housing deficit gap. None of our bodies were taking it up. My concern is, why would we include the media to bash them? And so I felt like at the property show, using this platform to share my opinions. What do you think is being done right with the property developers before we get into what's being done wrong?
Property developers are really filling in a huge gap, in especially the housing sector. I mean, if we look back before affordable housing came into play, especially this is a new trend, although it's catching up. We had a big issue with housing. And looking at how this thing has moved forward, I think they're playing a huge role in solving the housing deficit in Uganda. And we really encourage them to move forward and go on. However, there are certain areas of improvement which we believe they can tackle as developers. And also the government has to encourage them in that area. So they're playing a big role in the housing sector. We can't really rubbish them.
Currently, Uganda, we are at a deficit of 2.4 million houses in Uganda, the urban area. Where do you think there's much needed strength to be added to see to it that more Ugandans become homeowners, but at a relatively affordable price? Because majority of the Ugandan is the middle income earner.
Well, if you look at the development sector in real estate, we have the government, we have the private sector. So I think it is a joint effort. So with the national housing policy and the government, they need to bring all these areas together. The developers, especially the foreign investors, and also the private sector, they have to come together to solve this issue. Otherwise, if they're doing it individually, it's very, very difficult. It's a joint effort that is required to solve this issue.
The last time we had you on set, we talked about rental to home ownership, buying as opposed to renting. How are we doing in that department right now? Because if we're to bridge the housing deficit gap, actually even the houses for rent are not enough. People can't, and those that are in the market are a little bit of the high-end market, so people can't afford them. Uganda's biggest population is the middle income earner and the omuntu wa wansi. So currently today, where are we when it comes to rentals versus properties for sale?
Well, if you look at the rental department or area in real estate, especially around the urban centers, it's not well balanced. Most of the areas have informal structured or housing that's really not good, like the slum areas. The rent, part of it, you'll find it in certain areas. Most where the developers go is where the renters go, but other areas are not taken care of. I'll give you an example. If you look at most of the rental developments, as I always mentioned, in the eastern part of Kampala and also the southern part of Kampala, there's a lot of rental development. But what happens in other areas, there's a lot of informal settlements. It's an issue that also needs to be handled very, very well so that developers also move into other areas to put up houses for rent. It's an initiative that the government has to encourage people to move in other areas by building or putting up infrastructure for access. It's very difficult to access some areas and also to push aside developers to go there.
But see, when you even speak about access some areas, on Sunday night I went to Bulindo. No offense to people who stay there. The road is horrible. Starting from, I think, Nigeria 1, Nigeria 2. My God, you can think, Kabale roads, Zimbabwe roads are even better. You can think you're out of Kampala. And yet this is, how many minutes to the CBD is it? 20, 15 minutes to the CBD? 25 minutes to the CBD? But you people, you're driving and you can think you're in some war zone. Thank you. Uganda, yes, we may be a third world country, but we are developed. How do you have such infrastructure? What are we doing about these things?
Now, you've mentioned about Buwate in Nigeria area. What you need to understand about those are emerging areas in real estate. Those are emerging suburbs. And the reason why is that those areas were opened up by the Northern Expressway.
Yes,
They
true.
were opened up. If you look in early 2000, those areas were virgin and bushes, but that road really opened them up, and there's a lot of accessibility despite that the main road is bad, but there are other areas to move through and access the city. That's the beauty about it. So it's not only about the roads, but there are also other things that are needed for development, like schools, hospitals. They also play a big role. So if you look at that area, it's within Wakiso, and there are so many schools and hospitals. That's why most people actually move into those areas, shopping centers. So there are other factors in play as well that you need to consider, not only roads. If we need major development in other areas, as well these other factors have to play a big role. If you, for example, I'll take you to areas like Old Kampala, Old Rubaga, you'll find those areas actually are closer to the city
Yes.
than Nigeria. But you ask yourself, why are people moving into these other areas and not moving into?
And why is it that?
So when you look at areas like the old Kampala, Rubaga, closer to the city, but they lack certain things that really the young population desire to have. I'll ask you, can you point one shopping center in Rubaga? It's very difficult even to mention one.
Yes.
So they're closer, but they lack certain.
Why are they slow in their development? These are areas that have been there for quite some time. Areas that are just coming up like Nigeria, Buwate are picking up faster. Chigo, a few years ago, you couldn't access it, but the express came and now you can access it. Why is it that such areas are picking up at a slower rate as opposed to?
Most areas that developed in the 90s still have informal settlements. And also accessibility to residential areas is very limited. Why? The roads were narrow, and accessing those areas is very difficult. Even for development, if I want to put up a mall or any shopping center around those areas, difficult because of land fragmentation. They're already broken into small plots. So if I'm looking for an acre or two to put up a mega development in those areas, it's very difficult to find one. So that pushes developers in areas where they can have actually even cheaper land with better accessibility to put up these facilities. So it slows down the development in those areas and it's faster in the other areas which are a bit emerging.
When you bring up such topics, there's this comment of, no, it's because those areas have old money. Old money doesn't want noise.
Development is pushed by different factors. As I mentioned, you have accessibility, the major one. How is this area accessible? And also the land issue. If we look at the land issue, the areas within this close to the city were developed in the 90s. There are no things that really pushed development rather than right now. And also,
when you look at also Entebbe, Entebbe has also refused to develop in one way or the other.
Most of it.
It has failed to develop. You have the airport right there. You have all these foreign dignitaries coming through it, but it has failed to develop.
What we have in real estate is that emerging areas that are really pushing faster in development. Why? Because there's better accessibility compared to areas that developed in the 90s, like Rubaga, the Entebbe town. Okay, Entebbe town, you can still get some good piece of land, put up big structures. So that is limiting developers in those areas so much.
Off the pick of your mind, which are the 5 towns in Kampala that you say are going to develop rapidly at a very steady growth?
Number one, I think it should be Chanja. Chanja is really picking up at a very terrible speed. And there's so many developers doing good work or good structures there. We're looking at also Kisasi closer to Bukoto, Tinda, and also land is still relatively cheap in those areas. So what you need to know is developers look at areas where land is still affordable.
Land being affordable in Chisasi, roughly a plot of 50 by 100 roughly would go for how much in Chisasi?
Depending on where it is located exactly, but at least you settle in between 150, 180, 200 million, you can still get a plot in that area, that could give you a good development for wherever you want to put there.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 3, of course, I would look at Entebbe Road. Entebbe Road, there's Upright City, really well set up, and people are looking in that area so much also to put up housing. Chirera was really moving at a very terrible speed, but it was being limited by the road.
Okay.
So it just slowed down. You're looking at Nalia. Nadia and Chiwatu. Those are the areas which I'm really considering because they're closer to the city and land also is still cheap and available as well.
Now, in conclusion, Philip, I want us to go back to that question. What is your take on rental property? What can we do about that? How can we make it better? How can we advance it?
Well, first and foremost, sales have really slowed down in the past 1 or 2 years. So the main areas where people need really to concentrate is building houses for rent. We need also to expand on our mortgage financing.
The
So that
mortgage rate is still high.
yeah,
It's still a
yeah,
two-digit figure.
yeah. So we need to expand and give people options of financing so that they can be able to purchase houses.
I've seen some developers, a special appreciation to Universal M Enterprises. They are one of the first developers I saw that had the rent to own.
With rent owns really solves a major problem of people affording houses. Not everyone has a big chunk of money to buy a house, but they are able to pay rent on a monthly basis. So what normally happens is that you put up a house or apartments for sale, and at the end of the construction, people have already paid a certain percentage. I think it really works and also solves this issue so that people also become homeowners at the end of a certain period of time.
Rent to own as opposed to mortgages, which would you actually favor?
I would really favor rent to own. Why? Because it doesn't come at an interest. You don't have an interest. The price that has already been agreed on at the beginning of the purchase is the same amount that you need to cover during your rent period or your purchase period that you've agreed. If it's 7 years, if it's 12 years, there's no interest involved. So I would prefer that to be that kind of thing to be adopted in this country.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how many Ugandans can afford a mortgage?
In this current economic situation, there are few. I think about three, because almost people who have bought properties on mortgage, they are still struggling or they are seeking even to sell them.
Do you think the banks are making it any easier for Ugandans to become homeowners, or they are not actually seeing the need to make it a bit easier?
The mortgage department is still small and it needs to be expanded, as I've mentioned. There have to be more options for home buyers, not only through the bank, but there are also other areas, the financing that can really play a role in helping people acquire properties.
What are your parting words to the audience, Philip?
Really love to encourage Ugandans to really play a role in real estate. However, we have lowered our standards so
True.
much in all aspects of our life. Even you go at the quality of housing, we have lowered our standards. Secondly, I would also love to see Ugandans doing research. Research a house, research area where you want to buy a house. Thirdly, if you're investing into real estate, the major important thing after you've built a house or apartment is management. How are you going to run this property? People are suffering and they're losing properties not because they don't have money. How do I have an investment as an apartment and then they end up losing it to the bank? It's because it comes down to management. So those are the key areas I would really love to encourage.
But these owners don't have property management. Yes. So you find a property has no proper garbage collection. You find that there's no maintenance for painting because no one wants to collectively, But it also trickles down to maintenance. Yes.
So just one thing I would probably say, how am I going to manage this property? It will help you solve so many issues, especially new rental returns, the standard of the property.